I knew it at that time. Things would no longer be the same. Those torturous memories would wander in my mind forever. Forever.
I owe it to my uncle for my devotion to the ancient world, mainly to a strange and forgotten legend he told me when I was very young. The legend of the ancients. The legend goes that even before man appeared on Earth, there existed an imposing city, or maybe hundreds of cities, governed by a primeval ruling race that mysteriously vanished. It's said that the city became submerged in time and forgotten. A mere few of us hold on to the belief that there are still some vestiges left, buried deep underground. The expedition organized by my uncle and Nico over the last few years is finally to depart from Baralok, one of the last villages to the south of the continent, to the unexplored Patagonian woods. Meanwhile, I was in Buenos Aires, following up a clue about the almost forgotten legend, but soon I'd join the expedition. I woke up agitated. It was a cold autumn morning, and yet again, this time with even more intensity, I had one of those nightmarish visions. I was surrounded by the books and writings of Adriano Scapelli, a colleague of my uncle's, who'd supposedly found proof of the existence of the old legend. My inquiries to Scapelli's whereabouts led me to an old boarding house in the neighborhood of San Telmo, where he'd spent his final years. This is my last day. I can't stay here any longer, nor do I wish to. I need to gather the proofs that Mr. Scapelli mentions in his letters and leave as soon as possible in order to join the expedition. According to what I found in his office, Scapelli seems to have dedicated his final days to some kind of anthropological study. Oh, I could read this for days, but I'd better finish what I came to do. Dear Uncle, I'm staying in the next room to where your old university colleague Adriano Scapelli resided. I found this boarding house through a contact at the Science Museum, who told me that after his long research journeys, Mr. Scapelli finally settled in the boarding house of Mr. Nikolai Petrov, renting a room there for years. Sadly, I must communicate that Mr. Scapelli died not a month ago. Those few who saw him noticed that he was frail, thin, restless. According to what the owner remembers, he was an especially hermetic person, and in recent months when it became clear his sanity was slipping, he barely left the room. Mr. Petrov is a good man, of few words, and strict regarding the access to Scapelli's goods. He's a Russian immigrant, a decorated veteran of the Great War, and full of anecdotes I'm sure you'll be interested to hear. I've been able to find a number of books and writings of Mr. Scapelli's in his office at the museum. I compiled my analysis on the data that could be useful for our research and enclose in this letter. I need access to Mr. Scapelli's room to get more information, including the device that he wanted to give you, but it's condemned. Reparations had been initiated shortly after his death, but just a few days later they were put on hold under a bizarre police order. The order decrees that all items in the room remain untouched. No explanation was offered. So far, my attempts to make Mr. Petrov understand how important the findings could be for our research have been futile. He's currently with other occupations, and he's stalling my numerous I hope to find another solution to this problem as soon as possible. A warm greeting from Buenos Aires, Thomas. The room's a complete mess. Feels like it could implode at a moment's notice. The moldy smell of the room lingers, even out here in the hall.
Mr. Farrell, during your absence your uncle called. I left a message on the table under the phone. As for the access to Scapelli's room, I'm sorry, but remember we should wait until police investigations are complete. Well, I'm sorry, but I must continue my work. I have a lot of backlog.
Have you been thinking about it? Will you let me enter the room? Mr. Scapelli possessed valuable information. He was going to give me an item that he found on his expedition that could shed some light into our research.
I understand your intentions, Mr. Farrell, but the police order I received clearly says I shouldn't let anybody get into the room. But maybe I could persuade the officer on his next visit.
What about that photo? Was that taken during the Great War? You're in it, right?
That's right. This is one of the many pictures I keep from my comrades. When I was in the ranks of the Imperial Russian Army. I was in the front during the beginning of the Great War, 1914, when the troops were mobilized to Königsberg. After these terrible battles, I promised my wife that if I survived, we would move far away from those memories, from war, and, well, here you have me, several years later.
You have a lovely collection of music boxes.
I see you've been watching the beautiful collection of music boxes. They belong to my late wife. My dear Natasha was always fascinated by those melodies. She began her collection since childhood and used to listen always before bedtime. Unfortunately, I'm old and clumsy. I couldn't keep them in good condition, and now none of them work. I regret this.
Excuse me, but I reckon I could fix the music box with a wooden cover. I've taken a look and it doesn't seem to be in too bad shape.
I need to confess that you left me thinking about Natasha. Do you really think you could fix that little music box? It would mean a lot to me. Listening again to those beautiful melodies I shared with my wife would be very beautiful memory, and I would be very thankful. In the workshop at the end of the courtyard, you might find some tools that may be useful. Here you are, the key to open that beautiful music box.
Has anyone else asked for Mr. Scapelli?
Just a local policeman. He arrived a few days after. By then, I had not been able to contact any family member to tell them the news, or arrange for the collection of the possessions. He is a person of few words. Asked me some questions and immediately went into the room.
Is there anything else you can tell me about Adriano Scapelli? In his letters, he comes across as worried and scared.
During his last days, only a few times I saw him leave his room in the day. But at night he used to often visit the basement, especially after he acquired a particular item. He was fascinated by it. Sometimes I could hear him whispering, but they were strange words in languages I couldn't place. I remember one night I found him smoking in the hallway. He looked tense, nervous. I approached him with the intention of seeing how he was, but he just told me he could not sleep.
Could you tell me how the inspection turned out? Do you think he found something of interest?
After I told him what had happened, he entered the room. He seemed to be looking for something in particular, but I did not want to interfere. I left him alone for a while, and then he came to the reception with some old, tattered books. They seemed to be written in archaic languages. Most strange. However, he did not seem to have found what he was looking for. He asked me if anyone else had been there, and then left. I've not heard from him again.
Did you say a basement?
That's right. The boarding house has a small basement, which is accessed from the workshop. It has been years since I used it. Scapelli was one of my best customers, so I decided to lend it to him. He kept there several objects of study and collection. Unfortunately, I do not have the access key. It was in the possession of Mr. Scapelli.
What could you tell me about the piece that had Scapelli so interested?
The only thing he told me was that it was a very old idol found in the African Congo. I could not say anything more about it. Even I haven't seen it in person. But he was very interested in the study of that piece.
It would only be for a moment, I promise. It would be really helpful to me.
I'm sorry. No matter how much you insist, I won't change my mind.
It seems the workshop hasn't been used for years. There's a lot of dust and rusty tools all over the place. Here you go, just like new.
Mr. Farrell, I must admit, you did a great job. I never thought I would be able to listen to those melodies again. I won't forget this.
Here you go, a drink to the good old days. I think you'll find a better use for it than me.
Oh, this is an exquisite vodka selection, Mr. Farrell. That is very kind of you. Please, you can leave it on the table. Thanks.
About Scapelli's room, I don't mean to come across as pushy, but I need you to make an exception. Just this once.
You won't take no for an answer, will you? I'm a very strict person, but I think I can make an exception today for all you've done. The room key is in the board behind me. Feel free, but please be quick. I don't want any trouble with police. No, if you'll excuse me, I need to leave for a while to attend to some pending business.
This seems to be the diagram mentioned by Scapelli in his letters. Oh, the place stinks. I can't understand how Scapelli could shut him.
you